Hello there. Hi there. I hope it's working now, guys. Let me know. Aaron, thank you for the heads up. Travel Jones as well. It looks like it's working on my side now. Hopefully, it is working on yours. All right. It looks like it's working, right? Okay, so let's get back. I was sharing about this piece of news, like the headline today on UOL. UOL is like the largest news portal in Brazil. And today we have this news about Calderano. Calderano won the World Cup for ping pong, right? Ping pong, or is also known in Brazil. We actually call it in Portuguese, like the formal way of calling ping pong is a tennis table or table tennis, right? Like, I mean, you play tennis on a table, right? So that's ping pong. And Brazil won for the first time the first position in the World Cup. So that's a big deal naturally for Brazil. And that's what you see here in the headlines. And it was against a Chinese national. Chinese, they dominate ping pong. And, the few exceptions in which Chinese didn't win ping pong, it was when Europeans won the match, and now we have a Brazilian winner, right? So that's pretty cool. That's what you see. Other news, mostly about Brazilian politics, soccer as usual, right? And very surprising whenever we don't see President Trump on the news. That's surprising given the attachment of Brazilians when it comes to anything related to the United States. All right, so it's not naturally just President Trump, but anything related to the United States, and it's a love hate relationship, I would say, because many times, or I would say most of the time, we are just following news. We are consuming movies and all the so-called soft power output from the United States. And at the same time, many Brazilians feel aggravated by recent President Trump's policies. And there you go. Here you also see President Bolsonaro. President Bolsonaro has been through a surgery, but he's recovering well. And he was expected to win the next presidential election. Wasn't for the fact that he was found guilty of different charges for different stuff, and because of those charges, he is unable, at least so far, to participate in the next election. All right, so if you guys are with me, remember you have a priority in terms of topics to be discussed, and don't feel shy about it. Let us know so we can have like interactions and we can discuss about what's going on in Brazil. Uh, Very interesting, like many real estate transactions being started here at the firm. Many people from the United States saying that they are concerned about the future and they want to have a plan B. They want to have a plan B in Brazil if things go south in the United States, and therefore they are pursuing the real estate investor visa. There is also, of course, the retiree or the retirement visa in Brazil, which is pretty attractive as well. And there is also the digital nomad, which is more like an entry level, a bridge type of visa. The digital nomad is good for just a year. It can be renewed. But it is a kind of pain in the neck to renew every single year. You're probably gonna need professional assistance with the renewal. So even from the financial perspective, not ideal, right? And if you get something like the real estate investment visa, on the other hand, it's going to be good for 4 years right off the bat. And then once those 4 years are over, you can actually upgrade it to the permanent residency. So overall, a more kind of certain immigration path that's going to allow you to stay in Brazil for the long term, and eventually, if desired, to secure the citizenship as well. All right, guys, just let me know if everything is working well with our live stream. I want to make sure sound is good now. You can see image as well. And want to make sure that everything is good on your end. Okay, let's take a look. Let's take a look at our backlog. All right, Aaron is confirming. We can see and hear great. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for letting me know. So taking a look here at the backlog. Let me see one that could be interesting to you guys, not too technical for that matter. All right, like I work with AI. How do you see AI working in Brazil? Is there like an adoption of AI? Are people concerned about losing their jobs? Well, I would say, nowadays, the way I see is that markets or, countries, they are integrated. So the same rate I see of adoption of AI in the United States is kind of similar to what we see in Brazil. And in terms of jobs, I don't think we are experiencing, at least right now, like a big change in Brazil when it comes to people hiring resources. But there are certainly major changes going on as we speak. I'm going to give an example, right? Like one of the activities we have here at the firm is language translation, naturally, right? It does not matter the case. We always have some component of translation in our procedures. Let me give you an example. If you are applying for any type of visa or residency in Brazil, you're gonna need to translate documents, right? And those translations in the past, they would be done only by human beings. And nowadays, even though for some documents, for some important documents, such as a birth certificates or like a background check, we're still going to have translation done by human beings. Other documents are being translated only by AI. I'm going to give you an example. In a real estate transaction, the document, the purchase agreement, is always produced and revised and finalized in Portuguese. There is no version in English, right? No commanding version in English. At the same time, naturally, our clients, they want to know what's going on with that document. And instead of having the document translated by a human being, what we're going to do is to have a translation done by ChatGPT. We do pay the higher version. There is I think it's a $200 version of ChatGPT. That's the one we use for translation. And then whenever providing this document to our client, we're going to have like a watermark saying, translated by AI, right? And the idea here is to give something to the client so they have a good idea about the content. And if something is not clear, because naturally AI translation is not perfect yet, but kind of close to, then we can discuss with the client and iron out any questions that they have about that piece of translation, right? So this is a very practical example of a change in the way we do things, like even at the firm, like we're using AI on a daily basis. And it's changing the marketplace and the jobs, because again, I would say, just 5 years ago, this document would be translated by a person, and it's no longer translated by a person, right? We still have many documents that are translated by a person, but whenever we just need like a for information only translation, we usually, uh, 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 get our uh, uh, professional version, if you will, of ChatGPT, and it does great. It does a great job in translating that content. All right, so that's just like an example. Let's take a look. Matthew Davis, welcome, Matthew. Good day. Happy Easter, Luciano. Happy Easter, Matthew, and all of you. A quick question on the investment visa. Let's say if you buy a property that's less than the 1 million requirement, but then 2 years later you buy another property that pushes the total past 1 million, will this be considered, or it has to be one property for 1 million? Matthew, that's an interesting question, and the answer is that it could be multiple properties in theory. So yes, we do have actually clients here at the firm. Whenever we accept working with multiple properties for the purpose of the real estate investor visa, we usually condition that to be like 2 units from the same seller, because then it makes the whole due diligence easier, right? But in theory, there is no such restriction. You could buy, one property. Let's say if you're working with the Northeast market, you could buy one property in Fortaleza, another property in Salvador. And if those two properties together, they exceeded the 700, right? Because then in the Northeast is actually 700,000 instead of 1 million. So you would be good with those two properties, okay? And in addition to that, it doesn't need to be purchased at the same time or even a close in time. Now, this said, Matthew, there are two concerns that I'm going to share with you that you should factor into your decision process, okay? The first one is the fact that the 1 million reais, or 700,000 for the Northeast and the North, this amount has been set back in 2018. So it has been like 7 years already, and I think it is just natural that at some point the Brazilian government is going to increase this amount. We did some studies here at the firm, and we did calculate how much it would be if you would apply inflation correction alone. And instead of 1 million reais, it should be something like closer to 1.8 million reais. Okay, Matthew? So the concern here is that you buy something now, and then when you buy 2 years down the line, the amount is double, right? So it is like you're getting close to the original minimum requirement, but this minimum requirement is increasing over time, right? So that's a risk of this strategy of buying properties over time. That's the first one. The second one is about the immigration framework in general. Immigration changes very often, and because we have the real estate investor visa the way we have it today, it does not mean we're going to have it the same way 2 years down the line. So I think that the 2 year time gap, it is too much, Matthew, for the planning perspective, and also because of this chance that the minimum requirement is going to increase eventually, if you will. All right, Matthew, that's a common question we have in our consultations. So let's say if you're thinking about buying two, maybe you could try to buy just one now and in the Northeast, because in the Northeast, if you think about it, it's already less than 1 million reais. And in theory, it should be easier for a buyer to achieve this minimum requirement. Yokora, olá Luciana, bom te ver. Good to see you, Yokora. So good to see you. Glad to have your folks in the house. All right, so talking about the requirements for the investor visa is also very common for us to hear. I'm not sure if it is your case, Matthew, But many people, they have naturally, they have, spouses or children, and they say, well, if I buy the property, am I going to get the visa for everyone, right? We had a consultation this week. There was a lady, she was originally from a Latin American country, but living in the US for, I don't know, 40 years. And she wanted to get the visa not only for herself, but her kids and her parents as well, right? So, yes, you are able, like you don't get, like your family, they don't get the real estate investor visa, but based on your real estate investor visa, they can potentially get what the Brazilian government calls the family reunion visa, right? Meaning, well, you come into Brazil, you're getting this visa. What about your family? So they are going to reunite. They're going to reunite with you under the family reunion visa. And the family reunion visa, the interesting thing about Brazil, in Brazil, it's not like Portugal. In Portugal, whenever you bring in family members, they're going to say, listen, you want to bring family members? That's okay. But guess what? We're gonna add the amounts that you need to achieve across the board. So the money that you need to have, like in savings, they are going to increase. If it is a spouse, they are going to increase by 50%. If it is a child, they're going to need to increase. You're going to need to increase by 30%, and so on. And I think, by the way, that makes a lot of sense. But for Brazil, very interesting that Brazil doesn't look this way. Brazil just say, listen, as long as you have, financials enough to take care of your family, we're not going to exceed the amounts. It's more like a kind of, common sense test. They're going to look at at your income or at your funds, whatever you have. And if it looks like a decent amount, they're going to say, you're good. Okay, so not like Portugal from this sense. Now, this is usually available only to a spouse, right? So a spouse, no matter what, the spouse is going to be able to get the family reunion visa based on your real estate investor visa, and children up to 18, or they could be slightly older if they are in college. That's something very traditional in Brazil. We say, listen, whenever a child is 18 years old, they are considered as an adult. But if they're still studying in college, like there is this presumption that the family should be assisting this young adult, if you will, finish up their studies. So then they can go to the market and make their own money, right? So from this perspective, it's going to be the same thing for the family union visa. If you have a child who's 22 years old and she's still in college, Brazil is going to give it a thumbs up and say, listen, even though, this child is already an adult, we're going to let her get the family union visa because we understand she's still being supported by you, okay? Now, parents usually are not covered. Parents are not going to qualify. They are not going to qualify for the family reunion visa unless they are dependent on you, okay? So the dependency, like it's discretionary. Maybe the older they are, like the more dependent they would be. The dependency, it should be both financial and go beyond financial as well. So your parents should rely on you for part of their financials, and you would also provide some physical care to your parents, if you will. Okay, if that's the case, even parents would most probably qualify for the family reunion visa based on the real estate investor visa. All right, Matthew, I have a follow-up question. If I buy one property in Rio, then one in the northeast, will be the total needed to be 750 or 1 million reais? Matthew, that's an interesting question, and there is no answer for such question anywhere in the immigration framework. All right, so we need to just use we just need to kind of, be on the safe side. So instead of thinking that this would be maybe a factored calculation of those two amounts, meaning that, like if you buy 50% of, if 50% would be a 500,000 property in Rio, and in the Northeast you would be buying, like 350,000. Instead of doing something like this, I would strongly recommend you to actually work with the 1 million reais minimum, just because we want you to be on the safe side, and because there is no, let's say, definite answer anywhere in the immigration paperwork. This is going to be most probably left to the discretion of the immigration agent in charge of reviewing your application, right? And you never want to take the chances. So my recommendation would be, if you are mixing up properties, like from the northeast/north with properties from somewhere else, try to work with the 1 million reais, because then you're covering all the bases, and you're not going to be frustrated if the agent understands that you are not meeting the requirements by buying just like 850,000 reais instead of the 1 million reais. All right, Matthew, I hope that makes sense. We have a Cherry Mitchell. Good afternoon. Happy Easter, Cherry. Good to see you over here. Matthew says, okay, thank you. You're pretty welcome, Matthew. Thank you for sharing those questions. Very interesting questions indeed. And like I said at the beginning of our live stream, we do have, an increase in demand for real estate. There is a lot of uncertainty nowadays in the world, given, like the wars, given the, economic turbulence, if you will. So many people coming to Brazil for a plan B, all right? Like Brazil traditionally is a country that doesn't, enter wars, for, let's say, for no reason, like in Brazil, like we haven't been in wars in the past. Like the Second World War, Brazil actually participated along with the United States and other countries, but very usually just like a last case scenario, all right? Like, I mean, after the Second World War, Brazil has been mostly in what, is called like military peace campaigns, right? Like in Haiti, like a lot of chaotic situations in Haiti. So Brazil has a permanent presence in Haiti to try to keep things, a little bit under control. And so Brazil has this kind of vocation for being a peaceful country. And I think that this is a very attractive when you have, like, a lot of uncertainty in the world, right? Like, I mean, I don't want to downplay the fact that Brazil is not as safe, for instance, as Europe, right? Like, if you compare, I like to be very, transparent. If you compare Brazil to Portugal, of course, Portugal is a lot of ahead of Brazil in terms of safety, and that's just a fact of life. But on the other hand, Brazil is such a huge country, right? Like, I mean, in Portugal, I think it is, incomparably easier for the government, to take care of cities, to take care of the population, to take care of safety. Geographically, Portugal is kind of also isolated from other countries. So usually you have a lot of turmoil in Italy, Turkey, even Spain, right? Because they have more borders with other countries, but not Portugal. And so Portugal has a very unique geography, and I think also the culture. But the bottom line is that Portugal is incomparably safer than Brazil, right? So just want to make sure that I'm not just like highlighting the upsides of Brazil, but being very upfront in terms of the downsides as well. Okay, like our offices, just like more practical information. Our offices in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, they are in downtown, right? So in São Paulo, We are by Praça da Sé, which is what we call Marco Zero. Or that's where every single distance measurement is gonna be at Praça da Sé. It's literally like a couple of blocks from our office. And in Rio de Janeiro, we are in downtown. That's the same place in which you're gonna find the U.S. consulate. You're also gonna find the airport Santos Dumont, in which you have the main Polícia Federal in charge of immigration appointments in Rio de Janeiro, right? And in both of those areas, you do have challenges in terms of personal safety, right? Like, I mean, there is no other way to say that. And what we Brazilians we do, like, I mean, I am at the office all the time, and basically you shouldn't be like using your cell phone like when you are walking around in the downtown area. You're not gonna take your phone and start to make a call in public. Like, if you need to make a phone call, you're gonna go into a cafe, and then you can sit down, maybe enjoy some Brazilian coffee, and then you can talk on the phone, right? Same thing, like when you have your wallet, you're not gonna have your wallet on your back pocket. You're gonna keep it then, in a safer location. So there are, like strategies for you to cope with the lack of safety. And like, I mean, there are people, even from the United States, who have been leaving Sao Paulo, and they say, listen, I never felt, like unsafe in Sao Paulo, right? Which is pretty interesting to me. And we have like even a very interesting, interview here in our channel, okay, with a gentleman from California, and he just loves Sao Paulo, right? And you can find this interview in our website, and he does explain, like, we have, I think, a 40 or 50 minutes interview, like just understanding his journey. And he picked Sao Paulo, like as his destination in Brazil, and he couldn't be happier, and he couldn't feel safer, right? But very interesting. But again, my role here is not just to tell you the good things, but also the not so good things, and I hope you appreciate that. All right, we also have Bill. Luciano, what is the tradition for Easter in Brazil? When I was young, my mother would put together a Easter basket with chocolate bunnies and eggs to celebrate the holiday. Does that happen in Brazil? Yes, Bill, that's very common. So usually, adults, they're gonna like have eggs, like we have, usually chocolate eggs hidden, throughout households. And then the children, they are gonna need to do some work to find the hidden eggs. And once they get the eggs, then they are all happy. Very interesting to know, to be that this brings me memories of the past, because Brazil, and I think just like any other country, right? Things nowadays are more available than they were in the past. So, like when I was a child, usually we would get like a small chocolate egg, and we would be extremely happy, right? Nowadays, children are gonna get a huge, right, and that's very typical in Brazil, like huge chocolate eggs of all flavors, right? Like you can have a chocolate egg of a white chocolate, special chocolates with almonds, all types of chocolate. And when I was a kid, like, I mean, it was pretty much just like plain chocolate, and it was that tiny, okay? And nowadays you have, chocolate eggs this size, and it's so interesting, right? Like how society has evolved over time, and it looks like we have more availability of resources nowadays, if you will, because, like, I mean, I wasn't poor when I was a kid, like my father, he was the owner of a college prep course, and he was doing fine. But still, like, I mean, things were not as available as they are today. Just like you wouldn't get as much stuff as you get today. Like, I mean, I see nowadays in the Brazilian society, right? Like, I mean, kids are gonna get, just like I give you an example, they're gonna get, usually a bunch of eggs from different family members of, big sizes. And when I was a kid, it wasn't that the reality, right? So very interesting question, Bill. Bill is also asking, do you happen to know of any Brazilian outlets in the States where can I get real Brazilian coffee and acai? Yes, Bill, and they are actually pretty much everywhere, right? And usually you're gonna need to look for a local a local store, right? So I know that both in California and in Texas, these are the two states in which I usually travel to more often. They have, like a bunch. They have a bunch of Brazilian stores, right? And usually some of them you can search using Google search, but I would think if you use like ChatGPT, you can have a better chances of finding one close to you, just because sometimes they don't identify themselves as Brazilian outlet just because they are targeting the Brazilian population, and so they are going to use names that are not immediately conveying like what they are doing, right? But yes, they have a lot of things that are typical of Brazil, including the coffee, acai, which is like like acai. It has been like the probably the most sought, the most sought fruit in Brazil, right? Like we have we eat acai in so many different ways, as juice, as an ice cream, as a puree, as an ingredient in other types of food is very interesting. There is something else that is very typical of Brazil is guaraná, right? I'm gonna write over here guaraná, guaraná, both soda and drink from Amazon, right? So just like açaí, guaraná and açaí, they both come from the Amazon, and guaraná is just like it's so interesting because it is like a top soda in Brazil, along with Coca-Cola, right? Which couldn't be a less Brazilian, if you will. But again, I remember like my childhood, and sometimes I would say, well, I prefer Guaraná, and other times I would say, no, I prefer Coca-Cola, right? So very interesting that Coca-Cola is actually part of our lives, right? It does not matter if you're from the US, from Brazil, and most probably from many other countries, right? So interesting. So if it wasn't for the fact that we grow up and we end up learning about the origin of things, like, I mean, I would say, in my head, Coca-Cola and Guaraná, they are equally Brazilian, right? Because that's how I grew up. Like I would, go to a padaria or bakery. Is not the exact very concept like in Brazil. We call padaria, which translates as a bakery. But in a Brazilian bakery, you have access to all types of things, right? You can buy sandwiches, you can buy sodas, you can buy, sweets, candy, you can buy 1,000 things. Cigarettes, right? Is like almost like a convenience store in the United States, or a deli, or a bodega, if you will. But again, I mean, if you look at our upbringing, Coca-Cola would look just like something Brazilian, because that's how we grew up, if you will. Aaron, can a digital nomad with an R&M buy a gun to keep at their home for protection? Are there laws regarding safe storage, or can it be stored loaded on a tripod with servos controlled by AI? All right. So first thing, like for you to get a gun, Aaron, I would guess, like, I don't know the answer, right? Like, so it's more like an educated guess than a definite answer. But I would say you should at least have a permanent residency in Brazil, because the reasoning here is going to be like, the police, they're going to say, well, you just have 1 year as a digital nomad, and I'm going to let you buy a gun and then you're gonna need to dispose of this gun, like I don't know, 10 months down the road, right? So I think they would be resistant to allow you to buy a gun unless you had the permanent residency, because if you are a permanent residency, then you pretty much have, almost not all, but you have almost all the rights, the same rights that we have as Brazilians. So my guess here, Aaron, is that yes, you're gonna need an RNM, but not a digital nomad RNM. You're gonna need something more long term, such as a real estate investor visa. You have the first 4 years, which, by the way, are temporary. And after those 4 years, it becomes permanent. And that's the RNM that should give you a shot at buying a gun. Now, in terms of the tripod or servos controlled by AI, that's something, like I actually studied in both, like, when I was in college for my law degree in Brazil, but I also did study that in criminal law in the United States, and I can tell you that in both countries it looks like this is not possible, right? Like in the United States, of course, you have a more variety of understandings because this is usually state law. In Brazil, this is federal law, right? And you cannot have like machines that are going to be operated by either AI or something that's going to be like a trap when someone tries to invade your property, right? Like, or burglary, right? If you're talking about burglary, if they try to enter your property through like a small window, if there would be like a gun to shoot this invader, right? This is not allowed in Brazil. And if something like that happens and the person dies, you would be most probably be found guilty of murder, if you will, Aaron. So not compatible with the Brazilian laws. And I would say, maybe most states in the U.S. as well, all right? But we do have a discussion about guns and protection, and I understand it's just natural that a foreign citizen would have such concern given the information that Brazil is not as safe as we would like it to be, right, Aaron? So pretty understandable your question. Yuri Travis, olá, bom dia. Welcome, Yuri. Welcome back. If I apply for a union visa with a Brazilian, how long does it take to get the visa? Right. So this visa, right? Like, I mean, there are two major routes, or there are multiple routes, but we're going to talk about the two main ones, Yuri. There is one which is called Family Reunion Visa. So that's actually a visa that you're going to apply at a consulate. And when you apply at a consulate abroad, right, like you're not applying in Brazil, you're going to get up to 12 months, right? So let's say if you are either married or if you have like a civil union with a Brazilian, let's say in New York. So you're going to go to the Brazilian consulate in New York City, and you're going to apply for the family reunion visa. You're going to need to present a bunch of papers, right? Trust me, they're going to ask for, from birth certificate from both parties to declarations, registration of your marriage certificate or civil union if you have. Everything related to Brazil, it does bring a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, okay? But after you meet those requirements, they are going to give you this visa for 12 months, all right? This is the 12 months. And in terms of you organizing the documents and applying, you could easily take between 2 to 3 months, all right? Now, the really good thing, Yuri, is the one that you're going to get in Brazil. And the technical name of this version is going to be called Autorização de Residência por Reunião Familiar, or the translation would be Authorization for a Residency Based on a Family Reunion, okay? And that means, like the Brazilian national is coming to Brazil, the foreign citizen also want to come to Brazil. So in order to keep the union or reunion between those two people, you're gonna apply for a residency, but this application must be done in Brazil. You cannot apply for this residency abroad. There is no such a thing as applying for a residency in Brazil abroad. You need to do that physically while you're in Brazil. And the good thing about this version is that you're most probably gonna get the permanent residency, right? So there is no intermediary period of time, such as you're gonna see in the real estate investor visa that you get 4 years as a temporary one, and then it becomes permanent. When you're doing the family union with a Brazilian, when done again in the country, that means you're gonna get the permanent residency. Okay, now for this version, it may easily take you 3 to 4 months because you do need, for instance, you need to record your marriage. Let's say if you're married in the United States, you're going to need to record your marriage in Brazil. You're going to need the FBI background check with an apostille from Washington, D.C. You're going to need, it's a laundry list of things. And by the way, we have a sample list in our website. But this is usually something that's going to take you 4 months to organize. Okay. All right, Yuri. I live in Brazil as a tourist and curious about a union visa track with my girlfriend here. Yeah, so that's exactly what we're talking about, Yuri. Just remember, like if you have a girlfriend just like a fiancé, this is not a basis for any type of immigration benefit. You would need, like, at least to have a civil union to qualify for that program. And as you probably heard before, I always recommend that immigrants never, get into a relationship just for the sake of securing immigration benefits. Particularly in Brazil, unfortunately, whenever you are in a relationship with a Brazilian national, particularly if you are a man and you are, and the other spouse is a woman, there's going to be this presumption that you are, like the rich gringo from outside, taking advantage of this poor lady in Brazil. So, like at the beginning, of course, it's always, just love, just happiness. But if eventually this relationship gets to an end, it is somewhat easy for the Brazilian national, to sue for, not only like spousal support, but also get a share or, pretty much half of whatever you got as earnings or assets during the period of your relationship. All right. So just keep in mind that theory. Like I usually do not recommend, and I like to joke, right? Like whenever I have a consultation, I like to joke that either union estable or marriage, these are by far the most expensive routes for you to get immigration benefits in Brazil by far, right? And it's a joke, but and by the way, I'm married, right? Like for over 20 years, so of course it's just a joke, but at the same time, it does highlight that it's not just like upsides to following that route. There may be very substantial downsides as well. Yuri. All right, Bill is asking, what is your interpretation of saudade, right? Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Bill, and that's what probably makes me, right? Like, I mean, I'm not really good at bringing like, nuances of emotions, but I can tell you something very interesting about saudade, right? And saudade, by the way, for those who don't know this word in Portuguese, is gonna be like when you miss something, right? Like you could miss someone or you could miss something. For me, saudade is this, need that I have, to be in both Brazil and the United States, right? Like the first time I went to the United States, I don't recall if I was 8 years old or 9 years old. And to me, it was a life-changing event, right? Like I went to Disney And I was so mesmerized by the society, by Disney World, if you will, that I always had in myself that my business would be something that would allow me to be both in Brazil and in the United States, right? So that's how I would explain this concept, Bill. I'm always missing Brazil, and at the same time, I'm always missing the United States. Okay, there you go. Maybe too personal, but that's what came into my mind, Bill. I hope that makes sense. Paola Frota, welcome back, Paola. Oi, Luciano. What is the best way to transfer money to Brazil to buy property? My boyfriend is English and looking forward to buy a house in Brazil. Paola, so there to send the money to Brazil to buy a property, there are a couple of nuances that you're gonna need to keep in mind. If you guys are buying a property for the sake of the real estate investor visa, it's always better to send the money directly to the seller, okay? And then you can use currency exchange banks to try to time the release of the money to the seller, okay? So first thing, send the money directly to the seller, and don't forget that you need to control the date of release because you want to time the release of the payment with the closing. And why do you need to send like that? Because many people, they are going to send the money first to themselves, and only then they are going to pay the seller, right? And the problem I see with this track is that later on, when you apply for the real estate investor visa, the immigration officer in charge of your case, they can get confused because they look at the money and the money is coming from Brazil, right? So that doesn't follow the regulation of the real estate investor visa closely, which says that the money should come from abroad for the purchase of the property. So if you are hoarding money in your Brazilian bank account and then paying the seller, it does not clearly qualify for the real estate investor visa, right? So this is the first nuance. The second one, let's say if he's not interested in the real estate investor visa, he says, listen, I don't want to stay permanently in Brazil. I just want to, be in Brazil for a couple of weeks every year. So he doesn't need the real estate investor visa, right? If that's the case, another route, it could be for him to open a non-resident bank account, okay? I'm going to share here very quickly. If you come to our website, you can search for the non-resident bank account. Okay, non-resident bank account, and with this account, he doesn't even need like the RNMA. He could have, just like he could just use his passport and a CPF and a few other documents and get this non-resident bank account, which would allow him to receive money from England. And once he has the needed money to buy a property, he would pay using this non-resident bank account. Okay, there are many banks. There are many. By the way, we assist many people. They try to do by themselves. They get in a pickle and then they hire us to do it. Like we charge, I think it's $375. I think it's pretty affordable for all the work that should be done for you to get this account. And but we usually work with some banks from the market. I can show you which banks we usually work with. So this is a list. I'm gonna share this list with you guys. All right, I'm gonna share this list with you guys. That's the list from the Brazilian Central Bank. And by the way, I'm not recommending you guys should just get the list and start working with anyone. This is just an example, right? Like, I mean, for you to send meaningful amounts of money to Brazil, I think you should have, for sure, an attorney advising you on that front. But I'm just illustrating to Paola, all right? So that's all that is. It's an illustration, not a recommendation that you start to do things by yourself. But here, Paola, you're going to see a bunch of things, and many of these things, they are going to offer the non-resident bank account. I'm going to try to show you some. So this is one of the banks we work with, Banco Topazio. They offer the non-resident bank account. Let me see another one. Right. Yeah. So many of these banks they do offer the non-resident bank account. I'm just talking about the ones that we work with. This one, Banco BTG Pactual, they also offer the non-resident bank account. There is another major one, and you guys know about this one, is the Rendimento. Actually should be searched over here, Rendimento. This one here, right? So this is one of the well-known routes for the non-resident bank account, and we work very closely with them as well. Many people they try to to open a bank account with Rendimento. They try for a couple of weeks, they don't get anywhere. Then they hire us, and we get you a bank account with Banco Rendimento. All right, Paola. So right there, I told you about a couple of routes. I also need to say that today we started a little bit earlier than usual, all right? And we're gonna need to finish up a little bit earlier than usual. I hope you understand. And our next live stream is gonna be 7 days from now. So it's gonna be on Sunday, April the 27th, and it's gonna be at the usual time at 3:30. All right. But let's take another question here. GMX Mentor. All right, GMX is asking a question in Portuguese. Let me see if I can translate so everybody can follow. So our marriage is going to be recorded in Brazil through an attorney. After the marriage is registered in Brazil, how can I come to Brazil? After that, what is going to be the procedure to follow? I'm going to start with a joke, GMX. You just need to hire us, okay? But jokes aside, you're going to find, GMX, plenty of information. If you come here to our website, you're going to search for marriage, permanent residency by marriage, okay? This is going to be the page that you're going to look for. And we kind of explain how this thing works, okay? And you're correct. The first thing is to have the marriage recorded in Brazil. So we have here, like the eligibility criteria. We also have something very helpful, GMX. If you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you're gonna find this checklist, right? So marriage certificate, look at that one, marriage certificate. Needs multiple steps for validation, both place of origin Brazil, which is exactly what you're doing, right? Which is exactly what you're doing. But it also addresses other things. For instance, criminal records, like if you're from the United States, this must be the FBI background check with an apostille and sworn translation, all right? So there you go. If you want a first step, download our checklist and start to acclimate with the things that you're going to need to accomplish. And again, if you need to hire us for that, you're going to be among, a very select clientele of clients who are coming to Brazil to live on a permanent basis. And I'm glad to say that like they are satisfied with the work that they are getting, GMX. All right, so I wanna say thank you to all of you. Thank you, Bill, for the reminder. Yes, if you could come and like our live stream, that's very helpful for our business. I really appreciate if you could do that. It does help other people find this content, other people just like you who really need this content. Paola is saying thank you very much. Thank you for participating, Paola. That's what we are here for. Again, apologizing for finishing up a little bit earlier today, but don't forget, next Sunday we're gonna be here at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time, and happy to discuss any subject of your interest. Happy Easter to everyone, and you guys have a blessed rest of your day.